Joining us now is James Peterson. He is the Director of Africana Studies and an Associate Professor of English at Lehigh University. He's here now to discuss that shooting of a Florida teenager by a member of a neighborhood watch team. Good to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Well, let's talk a little bit about this. We have Trayvon Martin, 17-year-old, killed nearly a month ago, and it's just now getting national attention. What gives?
Well, there are a lot of things that were sort of impeding that national attention getting there. Number one, we should just note that Mr. Zimmerman is not officially affiliated with the Neighborhood Watch. He was not trained by the Neighborhood Watch, nor is he in any way connected to Neighborhood Watch. He was thought of that way in the community, but he had no official relationship. Essentially, we have to look at some of the institutions involved in the delay of us getting this information. First and foremost, we have to look at the Sanford Police Department. I mean, basically, Trayvon Martin's body was in morgue as a John Doe for about 3 or 4 days. While they did drug test the corpse and alcohol test the corpse, they did do a background check on him. They did not use his phone to communicate to any of his relatives for some time. And so it's unclear why that delay was in place, but that's part of the reason why it took us now a month to actually get the national attention that this case deserves.
And of course, there's a lot of things that are coming out now. One of the officers who wrote the police report said he never interviewed Mr. Zimmerman.
He did.
At the scene. I mean, that's kind of crime fighting 101, isn't it?
I mean, think of the irony of this. So they drug test and background check the corpse, Trayvon Martin, who is dead, but they did not do a drug and alcohol test on Mr. Zimmerman, no background test on Mr. Zimmerman. I mean, it really shows us some of the challenges.
At the scene that this was self-defense.
Yes, and this is the problem with the stand your ground law, is that it creates an atmosphere where these kinds of vigilante or really just random murders can be defended by law in ways that are very, very difficult for us to have any kind of proper recourse with.
And what's interesting is the 911 tapes have now been released, and it shows that the dispatcher said don't follow him, yet Mr. Zimmerman, for whatever reason, apparently did follow him, chase him down. There was an altercation, and the child ended up dead after going to get some Skittles.
He went to the store during the halftime of the All-Star game to get Skittles and the iced tea. And again, it's a tragic story, but we have to remember the institutions and the big things that are involved here. The 911 tapes, which I wouldn't recommend people listen to them necessarily, they're haunting in some ways, and you can actually hear the last screams of Mr. Martin's life and the gunshot. So we should caution viewers about listening to them, but it's really important information because it proves to us that Mr. Zimmerman was pursuing Mr. Martin.
Now, about half the states in the country have a stand your ground law. Do you have any statistics on if crime has risen or gone down with what some call shoot first?
Well, you know, it's interesting. Since the 90s, crime has been on the decline nationally for a lot of different reasons. But the stand your ground law, we have to now look much more closely at it. We need to look at every case where this defense has been used, and many of those cases are going to have to be reviewed because essentially we're empowering citizens to take make very subjective decisions about who may or may not be a criminal.
Right. Not only that, but in terms of how these cases go down, the real question now, and folks in Sanford are asking this, is with the application of this stand your ground law, are more of the victims African American and the shooters white? Now, this is something that came up just in the last couple of days as the pundits began asking these questions, but it's a legitimate question.
It is a legitimate question. What we have to remember, we have institutions that racially profile young black men. How can, if our institutions are not up to snuff on those kinds of policies and how to act in very, very critical situations, how can we expect individual citizens to? The stand your ground law empowers them to do that. Now, by the way, what the 911 tapes and the actual testimony of Mr. Martin's girlfriend suggests to us is that even the stand your ground law does not apply to what Mr. Zimmerman did. He pursued him. He could have stayed in his car. No Neighborhood Watch person who was connected to the National Neighborhood Watch program would carry a 9mm weapon, nor would they ever pursue a suspect. And then we have to look at the language of those 911 tapes. Essentially, they're saying, Mr. Zimmerman is saying that because he's black and because he's wearing a hoodie, he's guilty.
Well, I want to shift gears a little bit to a video that went viral, KONY 2012. This immediately got attention around the world, nearly 100 million hits. And some people are, why does something like that get so much attention from people around the world? And this other case here in the United States in our backyard takes a month.
Yeah, well, the sad fact is that the appetite for black pathology is quite robust around the world, and so negative depictions of what black folk do. And this is the problem. If you talk to people, I was in Nigeria a couple of weeks ago. If you talk to folk on the continent of Africa, in different African countries, what they say is that the international media generally reports negative things to almost never reporting any of the positive things. And so KONY 2012, there's a big appetite for that. And it really misses the point, right? Because one, Mr. KONY is not really a threat to the young people of Uganda right now. Really, the challenges in Uganda have to do with government and the economic and social policies that are oppressing the people there. So it would have been great to have a video about that, but that doesn't sell as much as the sort of sensationalized black pathology.
And we hear about this. This has been ongoing for years. I believe Ted Koppel even talked about it when he was doing Nightline.
That's right.
We talk about genocide in South Africa. We talk about wars and famines, but we never talk about new development. We never talk about new products that are introduced in parts of Africa before they get to America.
That's right.
There's a lot going on there that we don't hear about in America, and Americans get much more of a skewed version of Africa than the rest of the world does.
That's right, and that's the problem with KONY 12. It feeds into this narrative of an underdeveloped Africa that needs the West for all of its help, and that's just not the case.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. We appreciate your insight and analysis.